think there's survivorship bias now in the Web3 community because we started with the absence of technology that was capable of dealing with private data, right? So all the first generation of applications, of Web3 applications that came out were essentially around public information. And actually it was good to have those transactions on a public ledger so that you have verifiability and a lot of nice properties. But that first generation or batch of Web3 applications were built without privacy in mind. And so now many of those projects are kind of arguing, why do we need privacy at all? We need privacy because there's so much more besides what you can do with public information.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by WAGMI Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with another WAGMI Ventures podcast episode. We really like the AI crypto play and want to take another dive into this fast-growing space. I'm joined today with Miguel de Vega. He's the Chief Scientific Officer at Nillion, a new type of decentralized infrastructure that is based on the use of various privacy-enhancing technologies to support private storage and compute of sensitive data while seamlessly connecting to existing blockchain infrastructure. For anyone who is new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, and investors across AI and crypto. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. All right, I think this is going to be an interesting one. Welcome to the show, Miguel.
Thank you, Benga. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Right on. You clearly have a strong background in math and engineering. You're a PhD in telecommunications. You have over 15 years in AI education across data science, analytics, machine learning, large-scale data processing, like really strong knowledge and background. And I think you worked at Nokia, some of the pioneering AI and tech companies. On top of that, you've been an entrepreneur. There's so many pieces here. So tell us about your journey as a technologist and your journey into crypto.
Sure. So it all started back in 2000 after finishing my master's on telecom engineering. I started working for large companies, trying to solve the problem of characterizing traffic in the backbone of the internet, these big links. So that involved the use of big data, AI, and also a lot of mathematics like probability theory. That took me to actually doing a PhD on mathematics on that topic. And it was a very intense period of time. I think I published around 27 patents in 3 years. And then I started working for smaller companies, diving deeper into AI. And then back in 2013 is the first time when I started working with cryptography. And actually, it is the path that led me towards Web3. So it all started with zero-knowledge proofs, initially from a pure perspective of mathematics, and then solutioning, like developing solutions for Web2 around authentication and identity. And then in 2017, I met with Andrew Masanto, co-founder of Herrera and Reserve, so two unicorns in Web3. And we were exploring the idea of creating a privacy coin. Back then, we decided that it wasn't the right time or technology with zero-knowledge proof. I kept on working with other privacy-enhancing technologies like secure multi-party computation. And then back in 2021 is when we met again with other co-founders and came up with the idea of Nillion, came up with the idea of building this new type of decentralized infrastructure that enables to manipulate personal information, because we identified that was a missing element in current Web3 infrastructure.
Beautiful. And you say it's a missing element, and we talk about how AI has been really emerging as sort of like this tech that seems to blend well with crypto. Why do you think blockchain needs AI, or is it the other way around to scale?
Yeah, great question. To scale, probably it doesn't need it, because you can scale better with Web2 infrastructure, centralized, because everything is under control and it's just easier to scale it up. But I think if you want to grow it into a business that runs the most sensitive processes on the planet, then you do need and require decentralization. I think it's a must-have ingredient. We need an infrastructure that is definitely better than Web2. We all know the scandals and hacks that have happened in that vertical, like, for example, Equifax hack or Cambridge Analytica scandal. For decentralized, for AI, because it's such a special technology that is bound to run all the processes that control our lives and the life of companies and governments. We need something better. We need something that shifts away the need to trust a centralized provider and rather presents in exchange for that mathematical proofs and guarantees that the network is fair, that there's trust minimization, fault tolerance, privacy, verifiability, and all the nice features that you have from decentralized infrastructure. So I think that we need for AI and for other technologies in general, but for AI in particular, because it's so sensitive and special, we need certainly Web3 technology and decentralized technology.
Right, right. And that convergence of the two techs, would love to hear your thoughts on where you think the challenges are as a builder in that space. Where are the challenges and what are the key trends that you see with this convergence of the two?
I think a key trend is AI agents. They're very interesting because they can, given certain model size, they're able to extract more juice and value out of that model by applying a certain number of agentic design patterns, like planning. So asking the model to break down the task into several subtasks and planning ahead of the execution of those tasks, or reflecting on the output from different angles or perspectives to enrich it, or tool use, like the use of different tools like browsing or accessing like different types of services, and multi-agent collaboration, where you have different agents with different roles and so on. So these are just examples of design patterns for agents. And that's a very interesting topic, I think, for the intersection of AI and Web3, because with Web3, you can do what Web3 is very good at, which is to, number one, tokenize those agents. So you can monetize them, you can extract value from their use and actually reward the creators of those agents. So you can create incentives around them. And you can also add verifiability so that you can make sure that essentially you're running the agent that is supposed to be run. Like you're getting the service as it's written on the tin. But going beyond that, I think the main challenge that decentralized AI is facing is private data, is dealing with private data, because it's an essential component, I would argue, in AI. Like, I think that AI and those agents are going to get personal and are going to learn things about our context to be more useful for us. And so they're going to essentially turn into our digital clones that are able to recommend us medical treatments or give us financial advice, operate on a number of personal areas of our lives. And in doing so, they will become very sensitive because they will be manipulating very sensitive information from ourselves. This is what we call level 3 data, which is essentially all the things you would share only with your therapist, the things that make you really you, and your health information, your financial information, your biases, cognitive biases, what you really think about people, all of that will be exposed and known by those agents which interact with you on a daily basis. So it really becomes key to be able to handle that private data in a decentralized way, so that you can, number one, remove control from the centralized providers and turn that into a decentralized service. But number two, so that you don't have to put that personal data on like a ledger, like a public ledger, because that would be, of course, a very bad idea. And rather are able to run those services in a decentralized way, but with built-in privacy controls. So I think that is the key challenge that we're dealing now with in the space of the point at the intersection between AI and decentralization.
Privacy, right.
Yep.
And before we go into Nillion and the incredible work that you're doing there, why is privacy? Why is it important?
It may seem that it is not. I think there's a kind of survivorship bias now in the Web3 community, because we started with the absence of technology that was capable of dealing with private data, right? So all the first generation of applications, of Web3 applications that came out, were essentially around public information. And actually it was good to have those transactions on a public ledger so that you have verifiability and a lot of nice properties. But that first generation or batch of Web3 applications were built without privacy in mind. And so now many of those projects are arguing, why do we need privacy at all? we need privacy because there's so much more besides what you can do with public information. You can think of it in terms of Web 1, right? The first version of Web was only public. And then Web 2 became these monstrous things, like it flourished completely and it grew up really fast because it was able to handle private information. So now with Web 3, we are in a similar position as with Web 1 in the sense that we're able to handle public data. But what about private data? If we were able to handle private data, then we would be able to unlock a lot of applications. So I think it's a fundamental part of the value proposition around decentralization that was left behind initially, but that now needs to be included as part of it. Because what is decentralization? It's all about control. It's removing control from centralized entities. So how do they control things? Well, they control everything around the service provisioning itself. And that is, when do they provision the service, which is essentially censorship resistance, and what service they provision, which is all around integrity. That is what Web3 initially was about. But now, what else do they control? They control your data. They get access to your data and they can manipulate it. They can share it behind your back. That is part of what they control, and it's a very important part of it. So that needs to be incorporated into the notion of decentralization and what Web3 is. And that's why I think privacy is important, because it's a part of what decentralization actually means.
Yeah, and that is actually really key, the decentralization piece. I don't want to go too far around all the concepts without really digging into Nillion here. So with that background, let's unpack Nillion, a secure computation network that decentralizes trust for high-value data in the same way that blockchains decentralized transactions, to your point earlier. So what is Nillion and what does it seek to solve?
Yeah, essentially, you can think of it in terms of a new type of decentralized infrastructure. So it sits along blockchain technology. It interconnects with it, but it's not a blockchain. So we're not running consensus, for example. The architecture looks rather like a clustered architecture, whereby different clusters, they act as separate compute units capable of performing computations on private data without revealing it, and also storing that data without revealing it, keeping it private. And all of that is coordinated with a blockchain, but you don't need to run consensus across multiple clusters because they're pretty independent. So that is what we call the blind computer. And what Nillion has developed is essentially its own version of the blind computer, which we call the Nillion blind computer. And so you have this capability, this ability as a developer of Web3 applications to actually store and compute on private data on a decentralized infrastructure. And you have the ability to connect that back to on-chain events and on-chain smart contracts so that you can read from them, write back to them. You can seamlessly integrate this new type of infrastructure with the existing one. And what this does is to unlock a new design space, because suddenly you can write applications that are tailored or focused on consumers, because you're able to manipulate and store in a decentralized way, in a privacy-preserving way, their information. That is something that didn't happen before in Web3. So that is the key that unlocks, we believe, the further expansion of Web3 into use cases and applications that until now were only accessible to Web2 technology, because it's the only technology that could manipulate and could handle privacy.
So Nillion builds its service around this concept of blind computing, the processing of data without having to reveal contents, which presumably would allow for the creation of an ecosystem of applications that work together without revealing sensitive information. Is this important to achieve privacy, I guess, which you alluded to earlier or spoke about earlier?
Absolutely. And we're talking here about a different type of privacy. So in Web2, we have what we could call a centralized version of privacy. Your information is protected from third-party access when it's stored, let's say, in Google's servers or Spotify servers, or it doesn't matter. But it's not protected from the service provider itself, because it needs, even if it's encrypted at rest, it needs to have access to that information in plain text. It needs to be able to decrypt it, to be able to provide you with the service to begin with. That is the key challenge that Web2 is facing, that you can transfer information, you can store it in encrypted form, but if you want to compute on it, then you need to decrypt it first. Here we're talking about solving that challenge or addressing that challenge with a new form of privacy that we could call decentralized privacy. And what we mean by that is that not only third parties don't have access to your information, but even the network providing you with a service no longer has access to that information. So you are controlling the decentralized network. You're instructing it to perform computations on your data on your behalf through your access control mechanisms. But the network or the nodes in the network don't have access to that information. And that's where the word blind computing comes from, right? Because the nodes are blind, they don't see your information. So it's the analogy that we use to coin or term or call this new type of infrastructure.
Interesting. Hey, everybody. Quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. I love the way you guys have termed or coined it as blind computing, because that's essentially like the tech that it enables, right? And all the use cases are built on top of that. So where are the use cases today? Where are you seeing developers looking to build on Nillion, and where do you think the most promise and the most adoption is happening or will happen?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of builders working on, I think, on a number of categories. One would be existing Web3 applications that don't require Web2 data and they need added privacy. The other category would be Web3 applications that need Web2 data. And the other one, I think it's a big category, is AI. So the first one, you have things like custody, wallets, signatures. Here, the idea is that you secret share your private key so that it's not stored anywhere anymore, but is secret shared or shredded across a multiplicity of parties so that they're not able to reconstruct it, but you're able to instruct them to sign on your behalf, transactions or whatever. You have also crypto games, which require handling the private state from the game in a way that provides guarantees, so that prevents you from tampering with the generation of randomness for the game, so that you can guarantee your users that you're not taking advantage of the fact that you designed the game. You have also DAO, like private voting for DAOs. In DeFi, you have encrypted order books, you have private auctions, private trading policies. There's a number of things that don't require Web2 data. But now, because we're able to work with private data, you're also able to import Web2 data into Web3. So it's in a sense, is what oracles do, but oracles are importing public Web2 data into Web3. But here we're talking about importing private Web2 data into Web3. And there's a ton of private data. Most of the data on the planet is actually private. So we're talking about here the largest chunk of the pie when it compares to public oracles. And what you can do here is essentially store that data on our decentralized infrastructure, run maybe private analytics, and then allow third parties to do that for you. So you authorize third parties to aggregate your data with other users to obtain some insights, but never access to your data, so that you can build data to earn platforms and you can build data to access platforms. And there's tons of information that can be accessed through this. Like you think about all the services you have in Web2, like insurance, healthcare, utilities, education platforms, wearables. There's a lot of valuable information that now can be made accessible to Web3 users. It can be, in a sense, tokenized so that users get some benefit from it. And we're seeing a lot of interest. I'm really excited about these use cases. We call them data blobs because they put you in control of your data and allow you to take advantage of it in an economical way for the first time. And also there's applications around collaboration. So this is about Web2 companies collaborating for example, to optimize a supply chain or for anti-money laundering or other use cases. And then AI, finally, is really interesting to be able to provide privacy to the key elements in AI, which is the training data sets, the model weights, and the user prompts. And in doing so, you unlock use cases like private training, private inference, anonymization, private RAGs or retrieval augmented generation, agents. Like there's a number of exciting use cases, which actually also connect to the data blobs I was talking about before. So you can first store your data and then allow for AI agents to run on your data to provide insights to either third parties or yourself. So very excited to see people bridging the gap that it currently exists between Web3 and Web2 applications because they were not able to handle private data in a decentralized way. Now that is no longer the case, and I'm really excited to see those developers bridging that gap.
Yeah, these all sound really interesting and exciting. I'd really love to see, the use cases as they evolve and as you guys continue to grow in this space. I just want to touch very quickly on the recently concluded DEF CON in Bangkok. You did a presentation there. I think two papers. You talked about privacy in MPC, FHE. And for those of us listeners who were not able to have the pleasure of listening to it, I'm going to actually give us a high-level, non-technical summary of the talk. I know that's a tall ask, but just let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Okay. So it was a collaboration. It was two papers. One is called Ripple. The other one is called Curl. And there were two collaborations that we did with Meta, with University of California, Irvine, Delaware University, and Calgary University. And the goal is to achieve private AI. And what I mean by that is that you're able to run inference, so you're able to run the AI model while preserving the privacy of both your prompts. So your conversations will remain private and not known to the model or to the infrastructure that is running the model. And also the model weights are private. So you're hiding all the secret sauce here, like both from the user side as well as from the model provider side. And you're protecting everyone. So it's a very interesting goal to achieve because obviously it unlocks a lot of applications and it provides a lot of security for users. The problem when you try to do this, either with MPC or FHE, which are just two different ways of achieving this secure computation without revealing the inputs. In this case, the computation being running inference on the model. The problem is that you come across the nonlinear functions, which are the difficult parts of the neural network that you want to run. And those are the activation functions, which is a core part of each one of the neurons in the network. So those are really difficult to handle with MPC or FHE. And so what we did is to go and look somewhere else, in particular in the domain of digital signal processing, which has nothing to do with cryptography whatsoever, and make the observation that they are able to compress information really good. For example, there's this technique called this discrete wavelet transform that is part of the JPEG 2000 image compression standard. So we took these techniques and ported them into cryptography. So we built cryptographic protocols using those kind of image compression techniques, but this time to compress or to accelerate the execution of those bottlenecks, of those activation functions that are the bottlenecks in MPC and FHE, with amazing results, because we were able to actually accelerate the execution like one order of magnitude, which is amazing. And we're able to provide both solutions for MPC and for FHE. So it is a very exciting, I think, work in the sense that it took something from a completely unrelated field in mathematics and then applied it into cryptography to solve a problem. And it felt really well to connect those both separate things together.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave all the technical, the math, the cryptography to you, and change back to less technical thoughts here. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. I just thought it would be important for our listeners to hear what the presentation was. Obviously, I listened to the talk and I thought it was very useful as we sort of think about how AI is really coming in to balance things out in Web3. So what does the competitive landscape for Nillion look like?
Good question. There is a number of companies building blind computers. We are probably the first ones, but there's others on the landscape, but I wouldn't necessarily see them as our competitors. I think zooming out and looking now from a more strategic perspective, we are a narrative, right? We are defending or suggesting a narrative for Web3, and our competitors, our real competitors, are competing narratives for mindshare. So that's what we are competing for, mindshare. And the contending narratives that now exist in Web2, in Web3, essentially are incremental innovations around the same concepts of L1s, L2s. Let's make them more efficient. Let's make them faster. Let's make them more modular so that the architecture is better designed. It's improvements on existing technologies and solutions, which I call incremental innovations. What we are proposing, all of the privacy projects together in Web3, is what I would describe as a disruptive innovation, in the sense that it unlocks something new. It allows Web3 to do something that it wasn't capable of doing before. It's not necessarily doing the same things faster or more performantly or in a way that is more maintainable. It's about doing something else, something new. And in this case, it's about being able to work with all the private information that exists on our planet, because most of the high value data that exists on the planet is either sitting behind firewalls in companies, or it is data about ourselves. So it's about unlocking all that value that right now is not accessible to Web3 technology for Web3 technology. And that's why I think that's the value proposition. I don't think privacy itself is a narrative, but privacy plus decentralized AI, privacy plus decentralized DePIN, privacy plus DeFi, and so on, all those connections are actually the new narrative that we are pushing as privacy projects. And I think that is the narrative that is competing with the existing ones.
Got it. So among your partners in how you build out has been, I think, chains that have a AI play, AI vertical. And I think from my research, Near, Aptos, Arbitrum, Ritual are a few of them that you're currently engaged with, and I'm sure there are more. What is the idea of these partnerships, and what are they seeking to achieve?
Yeah, excellent question. The idea is what you referred to at the beginning of this podcast, which is to be able to integrate Nillion or the blind computer with existing blockchain technology. So far we've been talking about this blind computer as this cluster architecture that sits like in the space, floating there around, allowing you to store information, to compute on it without decrypting it or without revealing it. But how does that relate to Web3 actually? To connect it to Web3, we need partnerships in place. And those partnerships, what they unlock is the ability for the existing communities within those ecosystems to be able to actually read events from those blockchains, be it L1s, and that information, getting it fed into a blind computation. So you can feed that as inputs. And also then the outputs from the blind computation, being able to write them back to the blockchain, specifically to a smart contract in a blockchain, by using threshold signatures so that it's all decentralized. But in essence, you're providing read and write functionality from and to or on a blockchain. And that now provides you with a great combo. Like, you use blockchains for whatever they're good for, which is the management of assets, and everything that has to be public you can run on a smart contract. But whenever you need a private computation, you can reach out from those blockchains and actually reach out to our private infrastructure and run those computations there, and then reflect back the results on the blockchain.
That's pretty superb. I'd love to see how it all unfolds after your mainnet, I should say. I think it would be a bit remiss if I don't talk about ethics and responsibility when we talk about AI. How are you guys thinking about that? Or is it an active piece of how you build, how you develop the infrastructure for dApps on your network?
So far, AI has been mostly public, right? It's been trained on public data, and the conversations that we have with LLMs are pretty harmless, in a sense that they do remember a little bit, they have a little bit of context, but that's just very superficial. But soon they will become more and more private, because it's the way for them to be more relevant, more helpful for us, so that they learn about our context, they learn about our needs, our lives, and they also will start training on private data as well. That places an unprecedented amount of power on single centralized entities that I think is very concerning when you look at it from the ethics perspective. And they will be able to develop, if we allow them to develop, very accurate models of ourselves. So this begs questions around how predictable we really are, and to what extent can we be manipulated with our knowledge without us realizing that we're being manipulated, because those models will have also knowledge of our cognitive biases and vulnerabilities. I think it's better not to find out, and I think we need to remove that power away from centralized entities. So this is very important. It's the reason actually why Nillion, being a general purpose compute platform on top of which you can build almost anything, it is the reason why we're focusing on AI as one of the main verticals to develop first, because we think that we are at an inflection point with AI in our society. This inflection point where we either go down the route of ignoring all these privacy concerns, and we may end up with this situation where there's a bunch of centralized companies with a lot of power over us, or we do acknowledge this problem and take action on it, and actually develop this decentralized version of AI that has privacy built in. So this ethical concern is actually one of the main driving forces behind our focus on decentralized AI.
Yeah, and there's some of your other partners and perhaps even competitors in the space that have taken a much more confrontational approach to it, especially as you see very large centralized entities building and controlling a lot of the power. The decentralization is what brings about true privacy, I believe, which is very much in line with how you guys are building out. But yeah, appreciate you sharing your thoughts there.
Yeah.
It's something that is always top of mind as we talk about the emerging build and development of AI. And speaking about build, what does your roadmap look like into 2025? Any exciting new features we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so as I said, we're gonna be focusing a lot on AI. So all this research that I presented and others have presented recently, it's gonna be part of a product that it kind of presents to developers a very familiar interface, Python-like interface, but under the hood, it's actually running very advanced privacy-enhancing technologies to protect everything, like model weights, data sets, and user inputs and prompts. So I'm very excited to see what developers can do on this. We actually ran already a hackathon in London a few weeks ago, presenting a preliminary version of this technology, and it's just, I think, very exciting to see people build privacy preserving AI applications on top of decentralized infrastructure. And then also, like in the longer term, our end vision, I think, is to provide this key decentralized infrastructure that runs the most sensitive processes that you have on the planet. I think we are in the era of automation. Before, last century was the era of globalization. Now it's automation. It's going to be, run by AI essentially. We think that everything is automated nowadays, but it's not the case. There's a lot of decisions that are still being made by humans. That's no longer going to be the case, including decisions around our personal lives. So it's very important that we choose a right infrastructure to run those sensitive processes on, because it's actually going to decide the most important, it's going to inform the most important decisions in our world. And also, more business-like, if you wish, vision is to become a marketplace for privacy-enhancing technologies. We don't think there's a silver bullet in PETs. We think that it's a very exciting place where there's a lot of new protocols and new brilliant people with new ideas. And we want to facilitate that. We want to actually allow people to come up with a new protocol and not to have to worry about how to market it, how to find users for it, how to find nodes that run the actual infrastructure for that protocol. We want to solve for all of that and create this marketplace where You have developers of protocols, you have developers of applications on top of those protocols, you have users that make use of those applications, all of that triggered or incentivized by the use of a common token. So that's the vision that we have. And all of these becoming public infrastructure that is not controlled by anyone, but is actually controlled and run by people.
Fascinating. All right. Taking a step back, as I always do, and sort of ask what else you're interested in when you think about the crypto space. What else outside of AI do you find fascinating and interesting?
I find it very interesting, like what we were saying before, the intersection of decentralized privacy with with AI, like you mentioned, but also with other sectors like DeFi, Deepin, decentralized science, and now more specifically, I find that zkTLS is a very exciting technology. Now, zkTLS is this technology that enables you to move data, private data from Web 2 into Web 3 in a verifiable way. So it is the private version of oracles. Oracles were able to move public data into Web 3 in a verifiable way. This time it's about moving Web 2 data that is private, and that is where the most value lies. Most interesting data is private. And I think it's very interesting because we live in a world where there's poverty of verification, of verifiability. Like, not able to prove things to third parties. Like, I'm not able to prove that I'm worth a credit, for example, without actually showing a lot of information and a lot of evidence, when it should be as simple as me giving you some proof, some zero knowledge proof that there's certain conditions met on my bank account balances and financial history. And the reason why that doesn't exist is because servers don't sign their transactions. So there is this technology, zkTLS, that solves for that. It doesn't force servers to change the way they work. So still your bank is your bank, still Netflix is Netflix, and Uber is Uber. But now you're able to prove to third parties things about the data that you have with those providers. And I think this is a perfect complement to the blind computer because it enables to funnel in all that high value data that is private in Web 2 and funnel it into private computations that now take place within this decentralized infrastructure. So it's the missing piece that I think we still need, but it's coming to be able to close the loop so that now we have interactions and interconnection with Web3 because we have the partners in Web3, and now we have the ability to actually tap into the riches of Web through private data and funnel all that information into our Web3 infrastructure. And with that, you're able to bridge between the two worlds. You're able to open up the design space to a new level.
Fascinating. Wow. Thank you. It's been quite an honor talking to you and having you help us unpack and better understand this space. Really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to the continued success of Nillion.
Thank you, Benga. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much and have a good one.